Welcome to the Health Conscious Living Podcast. I'm Dr. Gayle Myers, integrative medicine physician. The purpose of this show is to teach you the same framework I've used to help heal myself and hundreds of others. We'll cover lifestyle health habits, meditation, and mindset topics to unlock your potential for optimal living and thriving. Welcome to the Health Conscious Living Podcast. I'm Dr. Gayle Myers, and today my special guest is Deb Harrison. Deb Harrison is a growth and change catalyst and kindness advocate, helping individuals and organizations to improve well-being and performance through career and leadership coaching to corporate facilitation and training. Her expertise has been recognized by multiple media outlets. She was the nominee for the 2023 Women of Influence Awards by Success Magazine. Deb was also on the panel of Harvard Business School online 2023 global event for International Women's Day, and an award honoree for New York's 2024 Lincoln King Visionary Awards. She reminds us to be your best you. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you for having me, Gayle. I'm excited to be here. That was lovely to hear your voice saying all of those things. It just reminds me to be grateful for every opportunity that I've had over the course of the last several years, but especially this past year.
Thank you. And it's so great to have you. I'm excited to talk to you today because there's so much out there in the world. And I've been reflecting on you and how you help people and how you help individuals and corporations and how you are, I like the change catalyst, because a lot of people aren't really big on change. And so what do you bring forth, and how did you get there to begin with?
Yeah, great question. And it's interesting because the term catalyst has kind of had a evolution into my business model and my business title. It wasn't something that I had really ever used right over the course of my consulting career. And then I was talking to somebody as I was working on a presentation that I was doing for somebody and some of the different activities that I had done. And that it needed kind of a phrase for something. And somebody suggested, oh, you're like a, growth and change catalyst. And I thought yeah, I guess that really fits. So sometimes it makes its way in there and sometimes it doesn't, sometimes leader or guide. But I think that the term catalyst is appropriate when you understand, particularly in the context of the question that you just asked. So when I was young and I struggled with anxiety and depression, which I've battled my entire life, I grew up in a household where there was a lot of trauma. There was also a lot of wonderful things at the same time, but there was some trauma. And when you're navigating through those, and I think this applies to also as adults, when you're navigating through difficult circumstances like that and you feel a sense of powerlessness because there's things happening that you can't stop, sometimes we become reluctant to want to embrace change because we have so many things that are already happening to us that when a small change happens, it feels like just one more thing that we can't control. And so we start to think like, well, I don't really handle change, when really we're handling change from the moment we're born, right? We're changing from the moment that we are born every single day. So all of us are experts at change, but what is the message that we kind of tell ourselves with that? And so I can remember there was a bedspread or a blanket or something was changed on my bed. And I remember feeling like emotional about the fact that this blanket was changed, right? And you think, well, that's silly. It's a blanket. But I think for me as a child, like all of these things are happening that I don't have any influence over. And this is, I don't want this blanket changed. And so that's like an early memory that I have that kind of ties in then throughout my life of that moment of having to realize, well, this is just a blanket and ultimately it's going to be okay. Right. And so when you start to adapt to that notion that you're going to have to go through these circumstances, it doesn't mean that you're going to be happy about the circumstances. It doesn't mean that they're always going to be easy, but that we can approach them with that notion of, okay, this is going to be okay. Not sure how, but it's going to be okay. And so in dealing with anxiety and depression, that mindset became really critical because when you're in those dark periods, if you've been in it and out of it, you really need to remind yourself that there is going to be something on the other side of it. When you can't feel it, which is really hard when you're in those dark places and you can't feel it. And that strengthening of my ability to kind of develop, whether you would say mindset, I think a little bit of it's mindset, some of it almost becomes habit, that you learn how to move forward through that, and would share with other people how I was maneuvering through that. And they would find things that I was suggesting that I was doing for myself as helpful for them. And so then I just started sharing more openly about it. And so even when it wasn't as normal, I think, for people to talk about mental illness and mental health stuff, I was speaking about it, right? So it would almost be like people be like, oh, you're going to admit to that, you're going to acknowledge that, you're going to tell people that. And I just thought, yeah, why not? Like, it's part of my story. And when I share about it, I can see other people feeling healing from that. And that has then carried over into my professional stuff. So it's incredible to me. And I think listening to you read the bio the way that you did, right, the phrases that you picked, it's incredible to me the way this very fragile child, fragile and strong at the same time, who is experiencing all these really difficult circumstances, how my way of maneuvering through that stuff as a child has translated into what I'm able to now do with something like a corporation that's going through a difficult change. And, you asked, like, how did you get there and what do you do? And I think that's what it was. I took the experiences that I'd had and I thought, like, what were some of the things that worked for me that could potentially work for others? And you apply that and you listen and you engage in deep conversation, because things that I used may not work for somebody else. So I need to meet them where they are and hear what their experience is. So that's kind of the big picture. I could go into some more individual stories, but I want to give you a chance to respond or question any of that I just said.
Well, no, I mean, I love it because as children growing up, it is, very difficult from time to time, especially when we don't have guides and people to hold our hand or talk to us. But that lesson about this too shall pass. This is going to be different. You will come through this, and you start to really tap into that resilience. And that's what it sounds like you were able to really tap into that and make it through to the next day, the next phase, the next, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And, in business and in corporation, we're constantly dealing with stress, right? There's always stress. There's always some issue to deal with. And to be able to have somebody like you come along and say, what's really happening here, and how you can tell us how you take that information. So you're listening because you're meeting them where they are, which is, of course, essential. And that, how does that listening change the communication and the collaboration and the attitude in that setting?
Yeah, so there's a great story I have that I use across, whether I'm talking about mental health or talking about corporate change, is at some point in my life, I want to say I was I believe it was in my 20s, and I had struggled with anxiety and depression my entire life. And we've come a long way in terms of how much we speak about it. But when I was a kid and going through it, a lot of times people would use phrases like, oh, she's very sensitive, or, oh, she's an emotional person, right? There wasn't the awareness that there was something bigger going on. And so you fast forward to the period at which I'm in my 20s, I was going through one of my worst kind of depressive episodes, and trying to figure out, like, what is happening? Why does this keep happening? And how can I address it? And came across an article that somebody had written where they were talking about their anxiety and their depression. And they used a phrase, grotesque horror. And I understood it. And I was like, that's me. And the validation that I felt, because, like, that's what I'm feeling. Right. So I wasn't saying, like, no, I'm fine, everything's going to be okay, I'm just going to get past this. I was owning it. I was naming it. I was saying, that is what I'm feeling. And I felt very empowered by that moment. And that's what I want to bring to people, whether I'm working with them as an individual coach, whether I'm working with them as an individual coach or whether I'm working as a company, is that the validation of the feelings of frustration, sadness, anger, fear, etc., that we tend to think of as negative emotions, which you don't want to root yourself in them, right? You don't want to, if you're stressed out about something, you don't want to just sit and be like, I'm just going to sit and be stressed out. But you need to acknowledge it to get past it. I felt healing before anything else happened. I felt healing from finding the words that described what I was feeling. So when I'm working with people, and you noted listening, right? I ask people, what are you worried about? Right? Like if we're doing some type of software implementation and people are not happy about the software implementation, the goal is not to just say we're doing this and you better just learn how to deal with it because this is what's happening. In order to get people to be part of the process, you want to understand where their reservations and their concerns are. So I like to have people, like, I'll journal. I'll say, I want you to write down right now everything that you're worried about happening. What are all of your negative associations with this process? And that works across change, whether that's a personal change, whether that's a corporate change. What are the concerns that you have? And when you own them and you acknowledge them and you give them words, you take away the control that this is something that's, I'm going to push it aside. This is something that shouldn't be happening. And you say, no, this is normal. This is natural. But guess what? You have maneuvered through difficult change before. So then next part of that is, okay, now let's think about times in your life where you've gone through a change that you didn't want to go through, whether you chose to do it or not, whether you said, okay, I need to make this change in my life, or life said to you, hey, guess what? This is what's happening, whether you like it or not. You had to maneuver through that. What were the things you did? What were the actual strategies you used? What were some of the words you told yourself? Was there somebody that you talked to? And then you can apply some of those same strategies that you've already used, because we've all overcome things that we didn't really want to have to confront, and you can apply them to that thing. So it's giving it the reality and then talking through and breaking down what are the actual steps we're going to take, so that rather than trying to like circumvent the resistance, we do what I call hug the resistance. Let's get down there. Let's talk to that resistance. Let's figure out where it's coming from, and then we can work through it. And something really fascinating happens when it's at an organization. And so there's a group of people, right? And they're all jotting their things. And oftentimes people think, well, this is a concern I have, but nobody else has this concern. And then they start to realize, like, oh, you feel that too. So now you're establishing teamwork. Then sometimes you'll have this person's got a concern, this person's got a solution. Now we're even changing that north. So now we're forming that team, that communication across the organization, right? Or when I'm talking to an individual and I say, like, oh, I get that. I've had that feeling before. And they're like, you've had that feeling before? Yeah, I've gone through that before. So when you feel the validation and you have that communication and you start to develop the teamwork, maneuvering through those challenging circumstances is not as overwhelming, because we already know that we've stated it, we're ready for it, and we're gonna continue forward. And then when you ask them to come up with the positive things, they're like excited. It's not like reluctant, like, oh, you want me to just pretend that I'm excited about this. It's like, we've just talked about all the things that were negative and the challenges and the fears. So now when we talk about the positive things, people feel okay about saying them because they don't think it's ignoring their concerns. So communication just opens up so many doorways to facilitation and as you said, catalyst, right? As being a catalyst to moving forward.
And for positive change. I mean, that's the key, because like you said, you've downloaded all the resistance. You've let that go, because resist what we resist persists, right? So you've just named it. You've just like said, okay, put that down. There it is. And now it's like, there it is. It's over there. It's not here anymore. It's not here. It's over there. And now what's here is the creative side, that people can start to come up with solutions and see that there is a new way to do it. And I can imagine when a whole group of people start to do that, that the power in that creativity must just be amazing to watch.
Yeah. And there's fear sometimes, I think, for leaders and even for the people that aren't the leaders. There's fear sometimes that if you start to talk about the negative things as a group, that it's going to become kind of a negative. We're all going to just sit and we're going to sit in the negativity, and that can happen. So, right, there does have to be conscious facilitation, and you have to be intentional about making sure that we're being productive in that. But creative. And I love that you used the word creative, because that's like a very important thing to me, is that everybody recognize they have some type of creativity, right? In alignment with multiple intelligences. I think that there's this multiple intelligences of creativity, whether you're going to figure out a very strategic way through something, or you're going to figure out something that has to do with an art form. We have that creativity, and acknowledging that, right? You talked about the creativity. I think sometimes we have to actually acknowledge all of the things we're afraid of, and then actually acknowledge that, like, guess what? You're a creative person, right? You don't need to step back and let other people solve this or figure this out or look through the solution. Like, you've got ideas and they're relevant. And that concept of asking everybody at the table to share their ideas, regardless of what their title is, regardless of what their background or experience is, from their perspective, what are some things that they think are a solution? And when you put those things all together, you realize that any one solution suggested by itself oftentimes is not really going to fit the bill, right? It's when you start getting a collaboration in there and these different pieces, particularly when you're navigating big changes, because there's going to be these unexpected things that are going to come up. So you want to get as much juice into that as you possibly can from as many people as are willing to share as possible.
That's lovely. I do approach it in a same but different perspective, and our audiences heard this, that we're spiritual beings on a human adventure to learn, grow, and gain wisdom and share our gifts with the world. So that perspective of who we are in our wholeness and that creative power is immense. And so much of the time we get caught up in the experience or in the physical condition that our body's in. And we have to back it up a bit and just remind ourselves that we're much greater than that. And what I love about what you do is that you put it into action in a way that is so productive on so many different levels. So the individuals in the group get to recognize who they are, and then they start to collaborate with each other. And boy, we need that on the planet right now. The other thing that I would love for you to talk about is that you're a kindness advocate.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And first, to just respond to what you said, because I love the way you say that, and I share that theory as well. And I think that spiritual part of us that's on that journey to learn, right? If we embrace the constant opportunities we have to learn, it's amazing the things that can happen. And that really ties in with the kindness piece. So for me, I think one of the ways that I approach kindness is recognizing that everybody's got greatness in them. Everybody's excellent. Everybody's amazing. It's a matter of helping people to see that in themselves and helping people to see that in others. And so that's why it becomes so valuable when you sit down at the table and you ask everybody to share that mutual respect, that understanding that at the end of the day, no one in the room is greater than or less than, regardless of title or experience, etc. Maybe somebody might have more expertise in a certain area or more ability to do something than somebody else, but we all have this greatness. And so what we can do, right, and this is the kindness piece, is help foster that. That includes ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves, and we need to recognize that. And we need to recognize that in other people. And every day when I wake up, one of the first prayers that I do is that I do justice to the gifts that I've been given. And that's part kindness to me, but that's also kindness to others. So if I've been given gifts that I can use that are going to help facilitate growth in other people, then I want to honor those. I want to honor those so that I feel my light shining, and I want to honor those so that I see myself helping other people to shine. And there's so many ways that we can do that. Simple words, simple acts and gestures, being respectful. It does not mean that you let people say and do whatever they want, right? Kindness does not equate to, I'm going to let people walk all over me. Kindness is about respect. You are able to disagree with people respectfully. You are able to say no to things respectfully. But when you see each person that you're talking to as an equal being who deserves kindness, it changes the way you listen and it changes the way you speak, because you become very aware that every conversation is an opportunity for incredible learning. Every conversation, whether the person is completely in alignment with you or completely different than you have an incredible opportunity to learn together from and with one another. And that to me is just, if we could get people to really recognize that, it pushes away a lot of the biases. It pushes away a lot of the fears that we have of competition, or somebody's going to be better than us, or is going to hit a milestone before we hit that particular milestone, because ultimately we're all moving each other forward. And that's what we really should be doing, right? If you take a step forward, reach your hand back. Who can you pull up?
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. And so how have you seen that outcome from that in your work?
Oh, so many ways. So I guess I'll share a couple of different stories of specific things that have happened that I thought were really interesting. So I'll talk about somebody that I worked with individually as a coach, and I got on a conversation with them, and they were sharing to me different challenges that they were having. And so I really wasn't, an initial part of this conversation wasn't offering suggestions or solutions. I was just hearing what they had to say, understanding what they had to say, giving empathy to what they had to say, and kind of repeating back to them some of their words so that they could hear them. And they paused to say, like, I feel like you're really seeing me right now. I feel like you're really hearing me right now. And I said, oh, that's really great. I'm happy that you feel that way. And they started proposing all of these different solutions and suggestions to the problems that they were having. And I'm wholly convinced that what happened there was they just felt love. They felt love. And because they felt loved, they started to love themselves a little bit more, because they realized, okay, this person's treating me that like I have value. And so they were able to recognize the things, the suggestions and thoughts and solutions that they had within themselves. Now, it wasn't a one-day conversation and then everything was corrected, but the fact that they were able to start offering those solutions and suggestions, rather than, I think, sometimes we seek from somebody, tell me what I should do, right? And sometimes people can, but oftentimes what we really just need is somebody to help us understand what we already know we need to do, listen to ourselves, peel back some of those layers and levels of confusion that we might be having in order to really get at the core essence of what matters to us, right? What our purpose is, what we feel called to do in this world. So that's kind of on a coaching level. You look like you're in a response, so I do want to let you respond.
Thank you. Because we have the solutions within us. We just have all these mental blocks and emotional, paths that we go down that derail us from remembering and accessing that solution that we already have within us.
Yeah.
So nice.
And we model it. I think we model it when you are kind to people in a room in general, and people see you being kind to other people, it does become contagious, right? It's I think, I used to have, to be honest, there was a concern sometimes because people would say to me, you're too nice, right? I don't know if you've ever gotten that phrase, you're too nice, right? And the idea behind the too nice is you're letting people do things that they shouldn't be able to do. Okay, so we do need to have boundaries, that's clear. But if you're going into each interaction that you have with somebody without the expectation that this is going to bring something back to me, there is not too nice. Then again, other than enabling somebody's poor behavior, which isn't kind, right? If somebody's doing something that's detrimental to themselves or others and you allow that, that's not kindness, right? That's not being too nice. That's not being real. That's not being helpful to the person. So when we start having these interactions and when we start, modeling kindness and modeling respect and being nice, and we're not doing it because we're waiting to see what the payback is going to be to us or how the person is going to reciprocate, but just because it's the simple act of doing it, it does start to become contagious because people realize the way it's making them feel and the way it's making other people feel. At our core, we all want to feel good. We have stressors that come up in our lives. There's times we get angry. I mean, the fact that I'm a kindness advocate doesn't mean that there's not times I get really upset with somebody. But then what do I do with that? Right? Like that emotion of being upset doesn't make me not kind. It's what am I then going to do with that behavior? I use traffic, I think, is a really good example because aside from if somebody cuts you off and almost, you need to hit the horn because something dangerous could happen, right? Like that's why we have a horn. Like, wait a minute, don't pull out. I can't stop. So like we do need to be mindful of when we're driving that we want to make sure other people are aware. If somebody's seems to be oblivious of some type of hazard, we want to alert them to that. But outside of that, if somebody cuts me off in traffic and I'm okay and they're okay, what good is it going to do for me to now be angry and either shout something out the window or, in worst case circumstances, obviously with road rage, people drive after them because they're thinking somehow, well, I'm going to get retaliation on this person, but retaliation for what? Right? If you're okay and this person is okay, at the end of the day, you have no idea why that person just cut you off in traffic. Did they just find out somebody passed away? Are they on the way to the hospital for an emergency? Did they just lose their job and they're just really not in the right mindset? All of these things that could be impacting it. Or maybe it's something really good. Maybe they're rushing because they just found out really happy news and they're just so ecstatic that they can't think straight. while we're concerned for that person, we know that there are all of those external factors that could be contributing. So in that moment, when you go, okay, that person just cut me off, they're okay and I'm looking and they're driving okay right now. I don't need to call authorities because they're an erratic driver. You've just saved yourself stress. And a lot of times with road rage, the other person isn't even aware. You're in your car, you're yelling at, oh, I can't believe they did that, but it's not really necessarily going to accomplish anything, which you could better be like, you know what? I'm okay. That person just cut me off. I hope whatever is the cause of that person cutting me off, they're okay. And now you're in control of the situation. And amazingly, you will find, like when I've suggested this to people, you will find that you actually feel much more relief and whatever the retaliation feeling you were going to get from projecting kindness at the situation than you would have from projecting anger at the situation. And so, I just think a lot of people can relate to the traffic thing, but we can do that in many areas in our life. Is this person okay? Am I physically okay? Then what can be gained here if I don't need to intervene from a safety perspective? Isn't it going to be much better if I look at a way to approach the situation from a place of kindness?
Absolutely. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, Deb, what 3 things would you like to share with our audience?
Number one, that they're amazing and that I want them to embrace that they're amazing. And no qualifiers. They don't have to list the reasons why they're amazing or the reasons why they're going to be amazing or how they're going to improve their amazingness. Just you're amazing, period. You have value. You're worth it. You're great as you are. That's kind of the baseline. I just want everybody to always know that. I would love it if everybody looked in the mirror every day and just said, you're amazing to themselves. And the second thing is to shine your gifts and recognize and honor your gifts. We have a tendency to sometimes get caught up in the things that we wish that we could do that we can't do, whether it's because we're comparing ourselves to somebody else, or sometimes maybe we have a childhood dream and something about our physical or mental or spiritual well-being prohibits us from doing this particular dream that we thought we had, right? So like, let's say if I decided that as a child, I wanted to be an Olympic skier, right? And now if I had an injury and I can't be an Olympic skier, we tend to fixate on those things. Like this was what I wanted to do and I can't do it. When we have so many incredible gifts. So recognize the gifts you have. What gift do you have that you're good at that you can offer the world? And recognize that, because you're already amazing, regardless of what you do. And then when you honor and recognize the gift that you have, you're becoming part of the bigger good, right? In terms of producing results that are going to benefit yourself and going to benefit others. So that's the second one, right? Is to really acknowledge and honor the gifts that you've been given as important as any gift or any skill or talent that anybody else has. And I think the third one would be, there's like a few that I have in my mind, but I'm going to say the third one would be to be grateful for both of those. Be grateful for the fact that you're amazing and be grateful for the fact that you have those gifts. When you live into that gratitude and recognize how incredible it is that you are who you are and that you have the gifts you have, it helps you to reframe a lot of the ways you look at things that you think of having happened to you, as opposed to being things in your life that you're going through. And that allows you to feel much more optimistic. And optimism benefits us because that's gratitude forward, right? I like to call optimism gratitude forward. And so when you've got that outlook, you're living forward into the amazing things that are going to happen outside of whether you're hitting a specific goal, if that's a financial amount or that's accomplishing a certain number of followers. You're living outside of that. You're living forward with gratitude that you've already been this amazing being and you have these incredible gifts. So those would be my 3. You're amazing, honor your gifts, and live in gratitude.
Oh, thank you. I love it, because that is what you're going to attract as a result, and all the people that can benefit from knowing you, from working with you. So thank you. Thank you so much for all your wisdom that you shared and your wonderful heart. Tell us, how can people reach you and how can they follow you?
So I'm on all of the major social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. It's at D Harrison PVD. On Twitter, it's Deb J Harrison, and on LinkedIn, I think it's is like hashtag Harrison Deborah, because there's a lot of Deb Harrisons out there. But any platform that somebody wants to reach out to me on, I would encourage them to do so, whether they're interested in my services or they just want to share a story or hear a story. I love connecting with people. I love hearing where people are from and where they're headed and looking at ways that we can cheer each other on. And I do want to say one parting thing, because I would have actually, if I had a fourth that I would add, I would say, surround yourself with people like you, right? Like if I may share the story that I was at an event with you, I'm telling the story whether you say okay or not. So I was at an event with you, and I felt calm in your presence. Your voice and what you were saying and the way that you were listening and sharing. And when we surround ourselves with people who are like that, who receive us and help us to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, it does amazing things to how we are able to be resilient through difficult times, because we know that those people are out there, loving us just for being. So that would be one thing. So definitely, yes, follow me on social media. But I would also say, if you're not already following Gayle or Dr. Myers, I should say, if you're not already following her, please feel free to reach out to me if you're in my audience and would like an introduction. But I would encourage you, surround yourself with people that bring you peace when you're with them.
Thank you. And uplift you. So thank you, Deb. What a treat. And last but not least, I believe you have a poetry book coming out.
I do. So this poetry book's called On This Path. It's poems I've written throughout my life. So I even have in there a poem that I wrote in 5th grade, just because I thought I wanted to kind of reflect on Deb through the years. Words and writing words and working with words has always been something that's brought me incredible healing. In some of my most difficult periods in my life, I wrote what I find to be some of my most moving poems. And I think that's because they were like almost love letters to my heart and my soul. So I would love it if people pick that up. It's called On This Path. It's going to come out in March. I don't have the exact date yet, but if you follow me on social media, I will be posting about that. And I would love for people to share that, because I think it's got a message that's going to help uplift people.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to read it and to share it. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
I hope today's episode helped you adopt more tools to implement daily. Choose change, look within, see your inner wisdom already exists, and live your optimal health. If this inspires you, I invite you to share this on your favorite social platform, share it with a friend, or just help us spread the importance of health-conscious living. For more health lifestyle tips, check out healthconsciousinc.com, sign up for my email, and follow me at Gayle Myers MD on Instagram. Hit the subscribe button. I'd love for you to give a 5-star review and leave your comments or questions. Until next week, rejoice in the health that you have.